Hi, my name's Phil. I'd like to talk about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss the pressure that the Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, seems to be under over his role in allowing, amongst other things, 250,000 people to cram themselves into a horse racing festival as the pandemic was taking hold in the UK, and how he is trying to rewrite history to suggest that we went into lockdown a week earlier than we actually did. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, first of all, Hancock's bizarre claim that we entered lockdown on March the 16th, when it was actually March the 23rd. Now, this is the easiest one to deal with. So let's say your memory is a little hazy, which it may well be. And, how can we prove that we went into lockdown on March the 23rd? Because Matt Hancock now insists it was March the 16th. Now, it's fairly easy. We could first of all go with his own words here. So this was him in Parliament.
Yesterday, I was able to announce that the level of daily deaths is lower than at any time since lockdown began on the 23rd of March.
So that one seems fairly conclusive, but we don't just have to rely on Matt Hancock's word against Matt Hancock, because we can also note that the coronavirus regulations, which provided the legal framework for the lockdown, which he put forward, it was his department that put forward, it was his name on the regulations, and the date, you will notice, of commencement was from 1 p.m. on the 26th of March 2020. So this is when the lockdown came into legal force. And then there's also a Commons briefing paper that notes that March the 23rd is the date when the Prime Minister announced the lockdown. So with that silliness out of the way, why is Matt Hancock now trying to claim that we went into lockdown on March the 16th? What is the purpose? Would it have, for example, anything to do with the fact that the government scientific advisors advised such action at that point? That they have since said that at least 20,000 lives would have been saved had we gone into lockdown 1 week earlier. Now, with Boris Johnson having confirmed that there will be an independent public inquiry into the COVID handling in the UK, Matt Hancock, you would think, is right to be nervous. Now, I mean, you wouldn't have thought too many ministers would be confident that they're going to come out of such an inquiry with any credit, with the possible exception of the Chancellor at this time. But Hancock is especially vulnerable because not only as Health Secretary was his department absolutely front and centre to the response, and of course failed miserably, but he is personally not part of Boris Johnson's inner circle. He's very expendable, and it's been clear to me for some time that he is likely to be set up as fall guy number one once diverting blame away from government stops working. I mean, that's the first attempt, blame everyone else but the government. At a point when government can't deflect the blame anymore, right, let's find someone inside government that we can throw under the bus instead to save the rest of us. He is going to be that choice. He's also intimately involved in one of the most talked about missteps of the government during those early days, namely allowing the Cheltenham Horse Racing Festival to go ahead. Now, on the face of it, a decision like that was, of course, not Hancock's to make. This was really a matter for Boris Johnson. But he is very closely linked with it. His constituency contains a major player in the horse racing industry, Newmarket, and he has been the recipient of £350,000 worth of donations from the horse racing industry. So a possible scenario emerges. Cheltenham took place in mid-March. Deaths were already being recorded at this point, and the number of cases was increasing. It reached over 1,000. A lockdown was being strongly advised, given that after abandoning test and trace, we'd lost control over the situation. Now, at the time, the numbers weren't high enough for the general population to see the danger. There's only 10 people who've died. What's the fuss? But the experts knew well enough what was coming. Now, at such a time, when any serious restrictions, even short of a full lockdown, any restrictions at all would definitely have meant cancelling a major festival such as Cheltenham. where the idea of cramming, as I say, 250,000 people into a limited space, and they are crammed for 4 days, would have been seen as a recipe for disaster. So then you've got a senior government minister, the recipient of £350,000 from the horse racing industry. And that is to say nothing at all of the expensive hospitality that he has also received from major figures in the industry as well. It isn't therefore too much of a leap to suggest that Hancock would have lobbied for there to be no restrictions, would have stopped the Cheltenham Festival from taking place. Now, later on, when Matt Hancock was asked, because of his links to the horse racing industry, if it was wise to allow the Cheltenham Festival to go ahead, he said that the government had broadly followed the science. Now, we now know that they did not. I mean, we knew then as well, but we can prove it now with what government scientific advisors have been saying publicly. But the bottom line is that if and when an independent inquiry into the pandemic takes place, it will make for very, very uncomfortable reading for all of those in government at the time. And Matt Hancock is going to be under particular pressure. And yes, I know what some of you may be thinking, just to finish off. Boris Johnson has promised an independent inquiry, has he? Would this be the same Boris Johnson that tried to suppress the release of the Russian report, which should be coming out today? The same one who has sat on several other important reports, including interracial inequality, that promised an investigation into Islamophobia in the Conservative Party just last year and then promptly dropped it very shortly afterwards. Yeah, that's the one. That's the one. But the thing is, if he tries to get out of this one, and he will, of course, I've no doubt at all that he doesn't mean it, the political pressure will keep building. It's an obvious wound for opposition parties to keep poking at savagely with sticks. Every single opposition party will have its own reasons for doing so. He will delay as much as he can, of course. I mean, common sense would dictate that you would carry out such an inquiry as soon as possible. Now, in fact, right now, so that you can learn lessons before the second wave that Johnson insists we won't be getting. But, you know, even if you believe that, better to be safe than sorry. Better to have it and not need it than to need it and not have it and all that. We're not doing that. He will absolutely leave it until the political pressure becomes too hot to handle. He will then attempt to have an in-house inquiry rather than an independent one. He'll try and go back on as many parts of it as he can. But eventually he will have to relent. And there's years to go before the general election. Or maybe he'll be ousted before then and his replacement might not be closely aligned. Maybe Jeremy Hunt, who came second in the leadership contest last year, would replace him and be only too happy to back such an inquiry in order to completely finish the careers of those who were close to Johnson that Jeremy Hunt will want nothing to do with. I don't know under what circumstances it will come or when it will come. I don't imagine it will come anytime soon. And I don't know how much Johnson or whoever is leading the Conservatives at the time will be able to clip the wings of the investigators in order to reduce the scope of the inquiry, because that will definitely be something, if it is someone aligned closely with Johnson or Johnson himself, will want to do as well. But it will have to happen, and it will have to be independent, and that means public. And as I say, there's going to have to be something ahead of the general election because they cannot delay it for 4 years. But those are my thoughts on it anyway. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. If you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.